Today we've got plenty of reveals for Space Wolves, including the new datasheet for Hounds of Morkai, and the new rule for fielding a frost weapon. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, where today we're looking at Games Workshop's previews of the new Space Wolf Codex. It's up for pre-order at the weekend for £17.50 or $30, and it's going to be a supplement expansion to the new Codex Space Marines. In terms of what was discussed in the preview, we already know their chapter tactic from Codex Space Marines, swapping out a 6-inch heroic intervention on characters for the standard 3-inch one on all Space Wolf units. Their Savage Fury unique doctrine is also unchanged, generating extra hits on every successful roll of a 6. Despite not having a successor chapter section in the indexed Startier Space Wolves that we reviewed recently on the channel, there will apparently be rules to field Space Wolf successors now, which I think is a bit of a shake-up, as it's not something that they've historically done, although I believe that there is some new fluff about it. I guess having a successor chapter with +1 to charge could be really handy for a Space Wolves army who kind of struggles to get into close combat, and it might well be more powerful to have that plus the exploding hits on 6s compared with +1 to hit. You would lose out on all of the Space Wolf special characters though, which is a bit of a shame as they're pretty good. Other than that, Warlord traits appear to have been reworked with more achievable sagas and buffs. There's one previewed relic, Frost Weapons is now a relic choice that we'll get onto, 2 new Stratagems though nothing too outstanding previewed, and perhaps most interestingly, the datasheet for the Hounds of Morkai, their new anti-Psyker Reaver variants. I thought we'd start with a look at the Hounds of Morkai, as to me that was the most interesting bit of the preview. These are the Reavers with the Space Wolf upgrade sprue, a kind of slightly lazy release on Games Workshop's part, but I'm certainly not against them adding another fun unit to the Space Wolves Codex. The Hounds of Morkai are 5 power level, which could mean that their points cost will be anywhere between 18 or 22, though I think that it will be 20 points or more, as they are essentially Reavers who already have the grapnel launcher. They are unfortunately a bit less flexible than your standard Reavers. The models have to take a grapnel launcher. They can't be just cheap bare bones Reavers, and they can't swap it for a grav chute. A bit of a shame in my mind. Unlimited Deep Strike might have helped them with setting up next to Psykers. Still, the grapnel launcher is interesting, it does allow you to outflank, and on very heavy dense terrain boards it could be quite interesting with pinging around buildings. They do lose their standard Reaver special rules, no more terror troops, and they don't have the shot grenades keyword, but they swap it for a whole ton of anti-Psyker rules. First of all, when they're shooting them with their special issue bolt pistols, they ignore Lookout Sir. I guess kind of helpful but still slightly limited use, just due to how short range they are. More interestingly though, they get +1 to hit and +1 to their damage rolls against Psykers. Of the two, to be honest, +1 to damage is far more useful. They're going to be getting +1 to hit most of the time anyway from their chapter tactic, and as you can't improve it better than a 2+, it means that that's going to be wasted a lot of the time. I guess the +1 to hit does help out with those bolt pistols though. Hitting on 2s, AP -2 and damage 2 could actually be a very legitimate threat to some weaker Psykers. Their runic totems give them a little bit of anti-Psyker protection as well. Probably the weakest of the rules as it only helps them, but it basically means that they can't be targeted by a psychic spell unless they're the closest to that Psyker, and they also have a 4+ feel no pain type save against any wounds suffered in the psychic phase. In general, I don't think that these guys will be top of the priority list for hitting with psychic powers, but I suppose it certainly doesn't hurt. Finally though, and perhaps most usefully, they have Morkai's Howl, which is an aura, and it affects enemy Psykers within 18 inches of the unit, and they must subtract 1 from their psychic tests when they're within range, and 2 from their psychic tests if they're within 6 inches. This one really could be legitimately annoying if Psykers are trying to rush forward and take the midfield, and it could sort of allow your Reaver squad to double as a kind of mini Collector's Assassin. 18-inch range is kind of avoidable if the opponent does want to drop back, but if so, I guess at least you're messing with their positioning. Other than that, in terms of keywords, they do have the Core and Phobos keywords for some good synergy with captains and lieutenants and things, which I guess is helpful. Overall, I think how much they get played will just depend on how many Psykers tend to pop up in the meta. These guys really aren't going to be taken as any sort of offensive unit for anything else. The Reaver profile isn't terrible, but it just doesn't compare well with other Space Marine options right now, and these guys are even locked out of taking certain things that Reavers get, the carbines, the grav chutes, or just keeping them cheap with no grapnel launchers. I'd say they're typically unlikely to make it into most Space Wolf lists right now, but maybe if we see some powerful resurgence of Psyker armies such as Grey Knights or Thousand Sons, then that might begin to change. So next we have the new relic version of the Frost Weapon. I believe by the way that this has been made into a relic, it means that standard Frost Weapons aren't going to be coming back in the Codex. Previously, Frost Swords, Frost Axes and Wolf Claws tended to give +1 strength over the standard power weapon. As per the new power weapon updates, essentially power axes and power swords have got that, and instead of getting +1 strength, lightning claws gained an extra attack. At least power wise, all Space Wolf units now essentially gain the benefit of frost weapons, and there's absolutely nothing to stop you modelling your power weapons as generic frost weapons if you so wish. It is a bit sad to lose that own unique bit of flavour, but they haven't really lost anything rules wise, to be honest. In any case, this new Frost Weapon Relic is an upgrade that you can give to any character with a Power Sword or Power Axe, a Lightning Claw or pair of Lightning Claws, or a Master-crafted Power Sword or Power Axe. The Frost Weapon rule basically gives you +1 to the strength and damage characteristic of any one of these weapons, and Lightning Claws get it on both claws if you have a pair. Honestly, this looks like really quite a fun upgrade. I'm not sure I'm all that convinced on it on standard Power Swords and Power Axes, but on Lightning Claws and the Master-crafted version, it looks really quite cool. A Wolf Lord with Frost Weapon Lightning Claws will be up to Strength 5 and Damage 2, should be hitting on 2s, be rolling wound rolls, and get +2 attacks. There's honestly very little that's going to want to get in the way of such a combo, and it's absolutely going to shred things like medium infantry. You're looking at 3 or 4 dead intercessors per turn with that little combo, and you could even go nuts and stack it with Touch of the Wild for even more attacks. Another one that really quite interests me is the Mastercrafted Frost Sword. Say if you pushed on the Captain or Lieutenant from Indomitus, that would give you a Mastercrafted Frost Sword with Strength 6, AP -3 and flat damage 3. Again, that's going to chew up a whole load of stuff, particularly being good against Gravis armor, which we see a lot right now. To be honest, I certainly could see this one being taken, though it will be interesting if Space Wolves still keep the Mastercrafted weapon rule, which is quite similar. I personally hope that they do, as it's quite good with Power Fists, which Space Wolves have quite good synergy with their +1 to hit. Next we have a couple of stratagems. Warrior of Legend is quite a simple one. It basically gives you 2 Warlord traits on your Warlord. Could be really interesting to make a stacked Wolf Lord with something like the Imperium Sword for +1 strength and attacks, and combine that with some other Space Wolf fighty Warlord trait, of which I'm sure there will be some in the Codex. The only stipulation is that the second Warlord trait must be from the Space Wolf's Warlord trait table. I could definitely see that one being worth a command point. The other one that we have is Healing Balms, one that was predicted by the community, as Space Wolf Wolf Priests are also essentially the apothecaries of the Space Wolves in the fluff, in addition to kind of being their chaplains as well. You basically pay 1 command point to heal D3 lost wounds on a nearby infantry, biker or cavalry model. I'm not sure if Space Wolves will not be able to use the Combat Revival stratagem. That's the one for apothecaries, where you pay a command point to revive a slain model, and in all honesty it's a bit better than this. Interestingly, I did note from the Space Wolves restricted unit list, basically they're not allowed to take apothecaries, but it doesn't say anything about Primaris apothecaries. So rules as written, I think the Space Wolves are allowed to take those at the moment. In any case, I think Warrior of Legend is really good and will see use. Healing Balms is a bit more situational, and I wouldn't plan around it. Finally, to round up, we have 1 previewed Warlord trait and 1 upgunned relic. Despite no sagas being present on that Space Wolf Warlord trait in the main Space Marine Codex, sagas do seem to be still here, though at least for this one it's got significantly easier to achieve. The one that we can see is Saga of the Wolfkin here, which used to be just +1 attack on the first round of combat, and it's changed to replacing Shock Assault with +D3 attacks, and you get it all the time. In general it's a bit more random, but I'd say it's an upgrade as you'll still get it into multiple rounds of combat. Might not be a bad one to combine with the Imperium Sword, where you could have an extra 2 attacks, where between this and that one, you could have +1 strength and up to +4 attacks. Could be very nice. As before, you have a Deed of Legend to achieve, and if you do that then you get an aura buff, though now the aura is slightly different to the Warlord's actual trait, which I think makes sense. The Deed of Legend for Saga of the Wolfkin is just killing an enemy model. I like the way it's far easier, but I can't say it sounds all that legendary to be honest. I do think it could be quite funny if you've sort of achieved your Deed of Legend by just squashing a Gretchen or something. At least it is a bit more likely to happen now. The previous Saga of the Wolfkin was killing 5 enemy models, which could be a very tall order depending on what sort of enemy you're fighting. Despite the aura buff being easier to access, it does seem a bit underwhelming though. It just means that Space Wolf core units within 6 inches will always get the benefit of having Shock Assault, which to be honest they're going to get the vast majority of the time anyway. It'll only help in ongoing dragged out combats, which do happen but not all that commonly. Overall though, I'd still consider Saga of the Wolfkin just for the extra attacks on the Warlord. Hopefully there'll be better ones, but it is certainly usable. It'll likely be a secondary pick to Imperium's Sword though, for me. Lastly, we've got a slight buff to a Space Wolf's relic that was from the core Codex. Black Death is a relic power axe, its strength +2, AP -2 and 1 damage, and its special ability is that it gets D6 extra attacks each time the bearer fights. That'd help turn your character into a bit of an infantry blender. With Shock Assault, a Wolf Lord will be getting around about 8 or 9 attacks on average with that. though it's just a bit annoying that it's still damage 1, so it's only really going to be good against 1 wound infantry. If I had a flexible Wolf Lord to arm, then I'd think about taking the Teeth of Terror instead. You lose a pip of strength, but gain damage 2, and you still get a bucket load of extra attacks. So overall, a fair amount of interesting stuff previewed today. Hounds of Morkai are usable depending on the meta and how many psykers are about. The Frost Weapon upgrade is kind of cool, though a bit sad to lose it on the majority of units, and I think we'll have to reserve judgment on the Stratagems, Warlord traits and relics until we've seen the full list. I'll be hoping to do a bit more of a thorough review of Codex Space Wolves once it's actually out, so feel free to check back later if you'd like to see that, or subscribe to Auspex Tactics. Finally, if you have been enjoying these videos, I'd just like to mention that I do have a Patreon page which you can find down in the video description below. Making all of these videos does take a fair amount of time, so if you're enjoying a lot then any support is massively appreciated to help keep them coming. Channel patrons get to see some new videos early compared with other people. There's regular votes to see what sort of things happens next on the channel, and you also get automatic entry into the Auspex Tactics prize giveaway each month with a chance to win some big model kits. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support the channel, then the link is down in the video description below. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.